Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Jim Morrison. Hal Humphreys, our host, is with me as always. Hey, Hal, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. We have a great guest. It's Liz Green, who's the head of digital solutions for Candescent. Liz is a very famous person known as Miss MISMO. She's the industry's leading expert on that. So, Liz, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, Liz, you are affectionately referred to around the industry as Miss MISMO. You are, as Jim said, one of the leading experts on MISMO. My first question is, what is MISMO?
MISMO stands for the Mortgage Industry Standards Maintenance Organization, big title, and it is a data standard setting body that has focused on mortgage banking for 20 plus years.
Okay.
And, they have been involved here in the last 10 years, providing the data definitions that have been utilized by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in the UMDP, the Uniform Mortgage Data Program, data sets. So we
Okay.
have ULDD and so forth, and
Okay.
UAD.
So MISMO is the driving standard behind all of the data that appraisers are putting into the UAD business that then goes on to feed other acronyms across the industry.
Yes. So MISMO provides that common vocabulary and definitions so
Okay.
that we can unify, right? So that way we have a common language.
As my grandfather would say, so that everybody's singing off the same sheet of the hymnal.
That's correct.
Okay. Well,
Singing the same notes and the same words.
yes. For the folks out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit of your history in the industry. Tell us,
Sure.
who is Liz Green?
Well, so I started at the tender age of 3. I always like to qualify that. I started with a company that provided a mortgage lending loan servicing system in my hometown of South Bend, Indiana. And from there, I have always worked in mortgage banking technology into the early 2000s when I got involved with a Canadian company that built a loan origination system for the Canadian market. And then we got that team back together a couple years later and created a Canadian appraisal management company, and then entered the U.S. market with a U.S. AMC, and that was Solidify.
Okay, very good. Well, let's do this. I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear from one of our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Sure.
LIA Administrators and Insurance Services, serving valuation professionals since 1978. We provide E&O insurance with a commitment to superior customer service, outstanding liability education, and unmatched claim defense, benefiting over 10,000 real estate professionals nationwide. Explore our exclusive Appraiser liability education by Peter Christensen and cost-effective seminars designed to foster your growth. Our underwriters, with an average of 26 years of experience each, are dedicated to supporting appraisers. Visit liability.com to discover how LIA can safeguard your business.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host, and I'm joined today by Miss MISMO, Liz Green. Liz, a lot is changing with UAD, both for lenders and appraisers. I know a lot of appraisers have some, I guess the word would be trepidation about the new UAD, what it means for them. But I want to ask you, what does it mean for the lending industry?
Well, I think to put that in context, we actually have to step back and look at the first UAD, which went into production in the fall of 2011. I've been involved. I got involved with MISMO in 2009 and was a big part of the work we did as a MISMO organization with volunteers to help work through the original set. At that time, the GSEs did not change the forms. So if you think about what it means for the lender, if you're selling to Fannie and Freddie, there are required documents, of which the appraisal is one, and the type of appraisal is obviously dependent upon property type, etc. And so at that time, back in 2011, the push was really to keep the forms the same, but partner it with an underlying data set that was built on a MISMO 2.6 standard, which was our older version. At that time, in 2009, MISMO had just started its latest version, which is a series known as version 3, and we are up to version 3.6. 3.6 is where all the new UAD 2.0 data is. So when we think about it from a lender's perspective, they obviously get the completed appraisal report partnered with a data set, and they use that information as part of their underwriting and to satisfy the criteria to be able to sell the loan. That obviously is part of what UCDP, the Uniform Collateral Data Portal, does, is the place for that data set and the appraisal to be delivered. Once that's been delivered, then the lender can access that record in whether they're using collateral underwriter or they're using DU, LPA, etc. So that's the first rung. And I don't think that changes much in the new UAD world from a process perspective. Obviously, the report and the data file change significantly, but the workflow will still essentially kind of flow that way.
Okay, so the new UAD from an appraisal perspective is a new way of doing business. And one of the problems that you and I discussed last week is we're now doing away with forms, and it's one interface where appraisers are going to key in their information. So the question is, how do lenders standardize their ordering process? Because they can't anymore, they can't say, I'd like a 1004 form. They have to say, I would like an appraisal on a single family residence.
That's a great question. So with the new UAD, a big part of the change is consolidating everything onto a single standard uniform residential appraisal report template. That new reporting requirement, I should say, has a minimum set of information that always must be present. And it is provided with reporting layout requirements from Fannie and Freddie that detail how it should be ordered and what should be contained. But the form numbers go away. So one of the things we've been doing in the Collateral Risk Network, which is an association of lenders and chief appraisers and risk managers, appraisers in the field, and technology providers, is talking about how do we help the industry get over this hump. And because we use the form number as a proxy today, and in many cases, in many shops, whether you're an AMC or an appraisal firm, you build your pricing and your turn times based on that form number. And so without the form number, what we need to be able to do is have a common way, and this is where MISMO also plays a role, a common way to talk about the property and the assignment parameters that we're looking for, including timelines, any additional exhibits, scope of work, basically, right? The appraiser is responsible to set the scope of work. The lender is providing the assignment details that he's looking for, and the appraiser is confirming a lot of that. And so as we, in CRN, we have a standards committee, and I've been the chair of that group. And in the last 8 months, we've published a white paper that was posted to our site, the Collateral Risk Network site, about a month ago. And we are working on some other pieces, but what we've done is we have recommended a new data set for order procurement based on a MISMO structure. And we have worked with the MISMO organization to be able to bring that forward, and that it would be published officially as an order procurement data set specification, so that folks, whether you're an AMC or a software provider or an appraiser, we would have a common way to ask for what kind of property, what kind of assignment, and so forth.
Which is going to be, I think, critical for lenders to be able to articulate to appraisers what it is they need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other interesting thing about how, because in the first round of UAD, we didn't change the forms, we just partnered a data set. In this round of UAD 2 or new UAD, whatever you prefer, the whole requirement has changed. So the deliverable from the appraiser, which includes the new URAR, the underlying data set, which is a MISMO specified structure that the GSEs have published the requirement for. They will also require the photos to be delivered as a package in a folder. And along with these pieces, they would be zipped together in one file for delivery. So that's a bit different than what we see today. And the other really, I think, modern, but at the same time interesting challenge is the GSEs have specified, these are my requirements. This is what the report needs to look like and minimum requirements and so forth. And here's my data set. But they're not telling the software providers out there. And I've known a lot of them for years. I actually used to work for ACI back in the day in 2010 through 12. They're not telling the software providers how to build their software. So we could have some leeway, some features, some competitive advantages that each provider is attempting to kind of blend into his solution for his client base, the appraiser.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break and hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. And I've got more questions for you.
The Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal, 7th edition, is a landmark text that reflects the depth and breadth of appraisal knowledge. Each entry, definition, and reference has been painstakingly researched and designed to reflect an expert understanding of issues that currently impact the profession. The new dictionary is an essential authoritative resource for all appraisers. The dictionary is divided into 2 sections, an alphabetical listing of terms directly related to real estate appraisal, and an addendum with topical glossaries and compilations of terms used by related real estate professionals. Find it at appraisalinstitute.org/dictionary7.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Appraisal Buzzcast. I'm Hal Humphreys, your host. I'm joined today by Liz Green. Liz has been working diligently on the MISMO project for quite some time now, and she's involved in what I think is probably a really useful thing for lenders and appraisers, which is trying to get some kind of a standard on the front end for ordering appraisals, because we used to, we would get an order and say, we need a 1004 on this, or we need a, whatever on that. And that was a way we knew what kind of property we were dealing with. So thank you for doing that, Liz. I think that's really important work. The question I have is, the UAD is going to roll out for appraisers in the not too distant future. It has been pushed back a couple of times, but it's going to happen. It's going to be an entirely new way for appraisers to interface with the data and build a report that is uniform based on, I've heard it described as like TurboTax for appraisals. You fill out this form and it gives you the next set of things to input. Could be. And again, depending on what the software providers decide to do. But what are some of the technology changes that are going to affect appraisers with this?
I think the first one that always comes to mind is that when we think about appraisal software today, I used to always call it glorified word processing for appraisers, because the interface that we use as the appraiser is the form. Right? It is the template. It's a boilerplate template. We key into it. Different solutions have different ways of cloning or inserting, common text and things like that. So this really kind of turns us around and causes us to go back to the basics of the appraisal process. Define the problem, identify the property, and begin to collect information and do the analysis. The new reporting, depending upon whatever solution you're using, I think there's a paradigm shift to that regard. So there will be a lot more emphasis on bringing in data, whether you're pulling comps today from your MLS or through your provider directly, or through another third party. There's the ability to identify in the new data set, these are the properties that I looked at, but I didn't include. They're not comps. This is the stuff I set aside. There's a lot more information gathering around condition and quality, for example. In addition to overall, there are ratings for condition and quality on the interior by room. We're collecting a lot more information on outbuildings, accessory dwelling units. In the case of a 2 to 4, there will be much more information than we're normally used to capturing. So when you then juxtapose that to technology, we start thinking about some of the stuff that rolled out from mid-COVID timeframe forward, such as the property data collection in the uniform property data set for that purpose. Again, from the GSEs, scanning technology. Things that are really kind of clustered around image recognition and AI for taking photos and pulling data out of the photos. All of these things are all kind of interesting new technologies that different providers might be leveraging to bring to bear a new solution.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think there's I think we could probably take up 4 hours discussing this topic, but this is a brief podcast. So here's what I'm going to ask. Would you be willing to join us again and dive further into these issues as we identify issues? And I also think, it would be really useful if you'd be willing to put together an article or two for the Appraisal Buzz, so that appraisers, they can listen to the podcast, but then they can go to the Buzz and read it and really do some research on what this really means for them.
Absolutely. And I want to also mention that our white paper, our position paper on the procurement idea for collateral risk network is on the collateral risk website, collateralrisk.org, I think it is. Jim will correct me on that. And when you go under resources, you just need to key in an email address so we can keep track of who's downloading it. There's really great information there, some samples of the new reports. And, our timeline is really coming up on us fast because the initial training material comes out in Q4 this year. There's a readiness period leading into the second half, Q4 of 2025, when it starts out in limited production. And then the mandate is in 26. So it seems like we have lots of time, but we don't.
This is just around the corner.
It is.
Okay. Well, Liz, thank you for taking the time to be here today and sharing your insights into MISMO and what it means for appraisers. I'm really curious to see if we can actually get a standard adopted for ordering language, the procurement process, as you say, so that appraisers know what they're dealing with when they get an order from a client. Again, the old 1004 order form, that tells us what we've got to look at. It would be really nice if we can have a standard for lenders to use when they're ordering appraisals. Jim Morris,
just really quickly say to that end, that is going to come out as a MISMO publication. We're using the same vocabulary that is in UAD 2. So there'll be a lot of synergy, and it'll be very easy for the technology from lender to AMC to appraiser to take advantage of.
Okay, I love it. Jim Morrison, are you still with us? There you go.
I am. And Liz is correct. It's collateralrisk.org, and we'll put a link up there for everybody who wants to check that out.
Great. And I'm going to suggest for our listeners, do click on the link, read the white paper, see what it has to say. We've got a lot of things to get our head around in the next several months. The new UAD, what it means for us. Ordering processes, how do we know what's what when we get an order from a bank? So read the white paper, start to understand it, then check back in with us. We'll have Liz on again to talk in more detail about MISMO and the new UAD and what it means for appraisers and lenders both. And also check out the Appraisal Buzz for articles by Liz about this topic. Jim, do we have an anonymous appraiser question that Liz and I might try to tackle?
We did. We had a question that was emailed into us. If anybody wants to send in a question of their own, it's comments@appraisalbuzz.com. And this question says, "Hi, Jim and Hal. I have a question that might be interesting for an Appraisal Buzzcast. In an ideal scenario, the sales comparison grid value range is narrowed after adjustments. However, even after utilizing adjustment software or proven adjustment techniques, I find that the range of value is still very wide or even larger after making the adjustments. How do you suggest getting the sales comparison grid range narrower after the adjustments?"
Liz, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, the first thing that runs through my mind is that, gosh, I don't believe I would be done with adjustments if my range was still that wide. So, that is, and I think that this is, to helicopter up a little bit away from that specific scenario and say, all of this new stuff, the new approach for UAD, the new technology, what we really want to come out of that is more emphasis on analysis, more data, right? We should be able to get more information through. We should be able to have a broader palette to compare and not have to be just, ratcheting adjustments down to get that range where it needs to be. Maybe we don't have the right set. So, as we start to move forward, I think that's a big takeaway for appraisers. And by the way, the comp grid in new UAD, UAD2 is much expanded. It's much more comprehensive. So, a good friend of mine used to always say, well, 3 comps and the truth, that's all you need.
Yeah, that's a fun notion, 3 comps and the truth. I mean, here's the thing. What I would say about the range broadening as you work on your adjustments. My very first mentor would have said, "You've got the wrong sales."
Right.
That's the first thing he would say. Number 2, look, I admit I do appraisals in rural areas, and sometimes you just don't have really good comparables. And sometimes you make your adjustments based on market data, you do the analysis, and the numbers splay out because of a bunch of different factors.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the work of an appraiser, the actual true value of an appraiser lies.
Mm-hmm.
Reconcile your sales comparison approach. Tell why this sale went walkie and that sale went walkie, and explain it and help the reader understand that, hey, these adjustments are based on market conditions, but they don't account for everything, and here's why.
That's exactly right.
We're dealing with, we're trying to shoehorn mathematical analysis into a world where people don't always make their decisions based on mathematical principles. Sometimes people look at a house and they say, wow, it's got this beautiful little stream in the backyard, and I can just imagine me and Susie sitting back there having white wine spritzers as the sun goes down, and all the math goes out the window.
Because human beings are involved.
Yes, because human beings are involved. And our job as appraisers, I think, where the real value comes in, if it were just a matter of running the numbers and spitting out an answer, then that's not that hard of a process. The value that we as appraisers bring to the table is the ability to reconcile those numbers and say, hey, the market's showing this, this, and this, and it's not doing what we would expect, but here's why. That would be my advice to the anonymous appraiser question. Number 1, you might have the wrong sales. Number 2, if they're the only sales you've got and there's nothing else available, reconcile, explain why they're doing the things they're doing, and then make your decision and explain why you made your decision.
Exactly. And by the way, comments don't go away in the new UAD. They are co-located near the data as opposed to being buried in an addendum. There's a lot of really good stuff in the new design of the new URAR for connecting the dots and telling a more comprehensive story. But the devil is in the detail.
Yeah. And, I do some degree of appraisal review, and one of the most frustrating things as an appraisal reviewer is I look at 10 reports in a 2-week time frame, and one's from Pocatello, Idaho, the other is from South whatever California, and the other is from and the appraisers put things in different places.
Yeah.
So the first thing I have to do as a reviewer is go through and find out where their sales comparison approach addendum is, where their highest and best use addendum is. The new UAD, I think, does a really good job of cleaning those issues up because everything is attendant with the topic.
Yes, it's a really important feature or enhancement to the process. And the other thing I would say that also helps with all of what we've been talking about with review and with telling the story is the MISMO layer introduces much more what we would call discrete data. So, and the way we do that are pick lists, right? Enumerations, as opposed to a lot of hyperbole and color. Like, we still want commentary, we still want you to support it, but there's a lot more specifics, and that really helps clean up the story.
Yep, very good. Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
pleasure.
Jim Morrison, do we have anything else we need to cover?
No, thanks so much, Liz, and we'll look forward to seeing your articles as they come through the Buzz and talking with you again.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thank you. And if we have nothing else for Jim Morrison and Liz Green, I'm Hal Humphreys, and that is your Appraisal Buzzcast for this week.